Hello, this is Doctors of Courage, and we are having an interview here with Dr. Muhammad Ali Rifai. He is an MD in Pennsylvania, a psychiatrist, and I'd like for him to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself and his practice. Dr. Rifai?
Thank you very much, Dr. Cheek, for having me talk to your audience. By training, I'm an internist and a psychiatrist. And I have a connection to Dr. Cheek because I went to the University of Virginia in Roanoke, Salem, where I did my residency for 6 years. So I know where Dr. Cheek lives in Roanoke, Virginia. Following my residency training in internal medicine and psychiatry, I became board certified in internal medicine and psychiatry. And I actually did 3 years of clinical work and research training at the National Institute of Mental Health in Bethesda, Maryland, prior to relocating to Pennsylvania, where I've been there for about 17 years. After I moved to Pennsylvania, I worked for a local hospital and did a lot of pioneering work on telehealth and psychotherapy. And then in 2012, I started my practice, Blue Mountain Psychiatry, and for the grace of God, I continue to be practicing through Blue Mountain Psychiatry. And I've just learned last month that the Center for Medicare Services has put me back in their good graces at the behest and the lobbying of my patients and the local legislators in this area after the not guilty verdict. So I'm lucky to continue to be practicing and to continue to be of service to patients in the rural areas of Pennsylvania.
Super. That's wonderful. Okay, now the reason why you're here is that you were charged and indicted with a crime, and that crime had pertained to government insurance fraud. Can you give us just a brief synopsis of that charge?
Sure, sure. So I was charged with 4 charges of healthcare fraud under under the U.S. Code 1347. 18 USC 1347. And basically, the charges were four charges of healthcare fraud. And these services were actually provided through telepsychiatry, through telehealth, back in 2017, when telehealth was not sexy or popular after COVID. And we had provided psychotherapy services to Medicare recipients in rural Pennsylvania. And the government insisted that these services were fraudulent, were never provided, despite ample and appropriate documentation. The government prosecutor took it upon themselves, as well as the agents, to indicate that these were fraudulent services. We went to trial. I had an expert coder and an expert psychiatrist who testified that these services were actually appropriate services. I did not testify in my own trial. The expert coder and the expert psychiatrist, as well as the cross-examination of my attorney, really demonstrated that these services were legitimate services. And the jury came back in 4 hours and found me not guilty.
Fantastic. Okay. And for the most of us, those doctors of us that have been through this, or the doctors that have had an idea that it might happen to them, have the idea that going to trial is really not the thing to do, that you're going to get convicted. The reason why you're here is that because you have been acquitted, you want to offer the knowledge of what a doctor that gets attacked like this can do to actually go to trial and be acquitted. And we
Sure.
appreciate that service that you are providing for other doctors.
Yes.
It's very difficult to get this word out to doctors, so hopefully a lot of people will see this and pass it on, knowing that this is going to be a session of discussing what you as a doctor can do to protect yourself, and then if you are attacked, what you can do to therefore continue your practice and not be sent to prison or have to pay fines or anything else that the government has planned for you. So let's get started. Okay. First off, oh yes, you want to have something?
I cannot emphasize the value of early preparation.
Very good. Yes.
Pre-indictment, target letter, when you feel that there's something going on, when you feel that there may be a government investigation, preparation is very important. And, some people even tell you preparation even before that, preparing yourself to have a legitimate practice that has a good compliance plan, that had good auditing, where you feel that you're doing well. Even though there have been many physicians who've done everything right, and they still got into the wrong side of the law, and they got indicted. But because of their preparation, because they were doing everything right, we talk about the Dr. Bothra case, where they wanted $450 million from them, but they were prepared. They had a good medical record system. They had a good compliance system, and they prevailed in trial.
Do you have anyone that you recommend for compliance to teach doctor how to be compliant for the records?
So the Chapman Consulting Group is a group that I dealt with, and I believe that they provide a great value in terms of being able to audit the practice, especially for physicians who prescribe controlled substances. In my case, I had a very small amount of controlled substances. I don't prescribe opiates. I'm a psychiatrist, but I do have controlled substances prescribing. I prescribe stimulants to individuals who had ADHD, and I do prescribe some benzodiazepines to individuals who have chronic mental illness and who have psychiatric issues. So I early on enlisted their help when I thought there was something going on, and their help proved to be very, very valuable.
Okay, very good. And we will put, for those of you that are watching that are interested in this, we will put these links to these various organizations and this help that Dr. Rifai is going to tell you about. We will put that on his post that I have on him by his name, Muhammad Ali Rifai, on Doctors of Courage, and I put it on as an addendum at the bottom of his post, so you can go there and get the websites of these organizations that he's going to talk about with us today. Okay, thank you very much. And Chapman, for many things, in addition to his compliance organization, of course, he is also a fantastic attorney, and he actually has a page on our website because of all the attorneys that we've dealt with. He has the best record for getting his doctors acquitted, and has the most experience. And that's one of the things you're going to talk about, is you need someone experienced in healthcare to be hopefully to be your lawyer and to help. And also, you're going to talk about also the doctor's responsibility in going through the records and so on. Okay, so one of the things about seeing it coming, having the light at the tunnels there, if you know this early, then you'll recognize it. But I didn't know it when it happened first to me. And when it happened first to me, what happened to me was every January, Medicaid would come to me and say, we want to look at 30 of your records. And I was thinking, I even complained to them and say, you don't pick January to be the month of looking at records. That's when I was a family practice. That's when family practitioners are working the hardest, because everybody's got colds and viruses and diseases going on. And say you should pick the summer. But anyway, 3 years in a row. And when I approached them and said, why are you doing this? Their answer was, oh, it's just a random draw. Well, that was BS. They had me targeted.
Yes.
So doctors out there, if you start getting requests for record checks by CMS, by healthcare services, you be sure and do as Dr. Rifai is going to talk to you about here today. Get your records in order and be ready for the potential raid on your office.
Yes.
Okay, so
and that was the first hint that I had. And this was in 2017 that I got the request for the audit. In August of 2017, I got the request for the audit. And even at that time, I enlisted an attorney, I enlisted a coder, I enlisted a psychiatrist to review my records. And I did everything right. And my records were pristine according to my coder and to my psychiatrist. And to my surprise, the coder the registered nurse coder that Medicare chose indicated that all my records, 100%, were non-compliant.
Oh,
100%,
and
even though
I bet she didn't even have a doctor's degree, did she?
she,
Did she even graduate from high school?
well, she's a registered nurse,
Oh, she's a registered. Okay, well, that's better than
but
most.
she's a registered nurse. But then one of the main reasons why I got acquitted is that when we presented her audit in trial, it turned out that she had fabricated many dates in the audit. And it turns out that some of these dates were for dates that I never saw the patient and I never billed for the patient. She just made up dates that these were dates that were non-compliant. And when we showed that in court, that kind of blew the lid off the entire case, and it kind of went downhill from there for the court.
Prosecution.
That's what they do, is that they hide things. They'll get an investigation and then they don't tell you what happened to the investigation. They'll tell you it's just random. You're good. There's no issues. And then they continue with their investigation unimpeded. In my case, they didn't find good evidence or any evidence whatsoever that they liked in the healthcare fraud. So they basically said, well, he prescribes stimulants to patients. He must be violating the Controlled Substances Act. Let's take a look at that also. So they said, well, he prescribes this number of Adderall pills. And they started going after me for prescribing Adderall, except they omitted one small fact, was that 85% of the Adderall that I prescribed were for kids under the age of 18 who had legitimate ADHD, who were taking Adderall to function in school, who were taking Adderall because they had legitimate ADHD. And this is why they went after me. Oh, he prescribes. Well, I'm a psychiatrist in a rural area where there's no child adolescent psychiatrist. I'm the only one who is taking care of these kids who were complicated, who had also other psychiatric issues. So they were not just getting Adderall, and this Adderall wasn't being diverted. This Adderall was going to kids who needed it to function in school, to be able to do their homework, to be able to pass. And the DEA came after me and they said, oh, he prescribes this many thousand pills of Adderall. And they never told the magistrate, they never told the court that this 85% was for kids.
Okay. One of the things that I've recognized in the course of my time of working Doctors of Courage and since my attacks is that there are specific types of doctors that are targeted. And you're one of them. Okay.
Yes.
You're a minority physician,
Yes.
minority of a background.
Yes.
And you are treating patients that I consider to be expendable by the government. Okay.
Yes.
That is the poor, the government insured,
Yes.
the uninsured,
Yes.
the disabled,
Yes.
and the elderly.
Yes.
Now you also say you treated kids, but
Yes.
in the poor areas of
Oh,
Pennsylvania.
my patients, the patients that I got charged on are literally the expendable.
Yeah.
Elderly people in rural nursing homes in Pennsylvania that the government didn't mind them dying in COVID, that the government didn't mind them experiencing psychiatric issues. And one of the patients that they charged me with, they said the patient didn't need psychotherapy. The patient, a week before we did the psychotherapy session that they charged us for, tried to kill herself, tried to commit suicide in the nursing home. And then the government prosecutor got on the podium and told the jury, oh, this was medically not necessary. A psychotherapy service to a patient who was suicidal is not medically necessary.
Yeah, well, I don't want to discourage doctors out there from treating the expendable patients. I think that's what medicine is all about. Most
Absolutely.
of us, 78% of, and this is statistical, 78% of doctors, at least when I checked the statistics, it might be changed now, got into the profession to help people.
Sure,
I think
sure.
maybe there's a little bit more looking for the financial good of it that now, and it's not maybe not as many out there wanting to help people, but you're one of those in that generation that did get into the profession to help people, and
Absolutely.
that is
Absolutely.
recommendable. That is commendable, and I'm not trying to dissuade doctors from being that type of doctor,
Mhm.
but the thing we have to do is recognize the fact that there are certain doctors that are being targeted. The government has an agenda, and we have to inform the public of this.
Yes.
So that doctors who go before trial, like I did, like Dr. Rifai did, actually get a trial that is where the juror is not dealing with the propaganda in their own minds that doctors are only out for the money, or they're, drug dealers in white coats, all this propaganda the government puts out there so that they can win more cases. And we're going to talk more about how your impression is about winning the cases, what people need to do. One thing, I want to go back, and this is something about the Chapman Law Group and the things that need to be done before trial. You had written in something, I don't know exactly where I got this information, but that the things that a person needs, that they do for a person, is they give I'm going to read this off because I'm looking
Right.
at it,
Go ahead.
on your page.
Sure. Sure.
They give a complete assessment of the medical practices compliance to ensure alignment with standards of care and regulatory guidelines. They do interviews with your current and previous employees. They give a detailed review of medical and billing records, and they interview current and previous patients, and they partner with the legal team to provide expert guidance, assist with interviewing witnesses, and preparing for testimony.
Yes.
Those are the kind of like the ideas of the Chapman Law Group and what their compliance group does. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I truly think that in my case, that the government's intention was to charge me with Controlled Substances Act violations. That was my target letter. It's public matter. It's on the court docket. So they were intending to charge me with Controlled Substances Act violation for prescribing Adderall. However, I think that involving the Chapman Consulting Group and involving Attorney Ron Chapman II really um, uh, led
Change their mind?
to the change their mind and led to the outcome that actually half of the case got omitted, and I only got charged with healthcare fraud violations. And my attorney, Mr. Paul Hetznecker, was able to beat those charges. So I really thought that just involving Chapman and his consulting group was enough to dissuade the government from going after these Controlled Substance Act violations in my case. So we were sure that there's going to be Controlled Substances Act violation charges, and then they didn't come, and it was probably because of the involvement of the Chapman Group.
Okay, very good. One of the things, I know all of these different groups that you had was quite a financial burden for
Absolutely,
you.
absolutely,
And
yes,
being a solo practitioner, being an internal medicine doctor and
yes,
a psychiatrist, I know you weren't just bringing home the bacon every day, every time you saw patients. I know you worked like the devil and
yes,
was really handed, especially when you're dealing with Medicare and
yes,
Medicaid insurance, you're
yes.
getting like, $18 a visit or something like that.
There you go, there
Not
you
a
go,
whole lot.
there you go.
So how would you recommend for people in your situation, or like mine? I was a poor country physician as well.
Mhm.
That how would you recommend for them to be able to kind of like have um have the financial ability
Sure,
to
sure,
or
sure.
to hire these groups?
I saved early. I knew this was coming, so I saved for the trial and the expenditure of the trial. I tapped in my 401k. I had a 401k. It's all gone now. I basically borrowed from family. I was lucky. I have a big family. I have two older brothers who are also physicians, a younger sister who's a physician. So
Hmm.
I borrowed from family. If it wasn't for the grace of God and support of family, I wouldn't be
Wouldn't have
here.
made it.
I
Yeah.
would be I would be at Federal Correctional Institute in Otisville. I had already. I'm telling everybody. Prepare yourself as if you're go to trial. Prepare yourself as if you're going to jail. I went and visited that facility in Otisville. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours from where I live. And I knew that if I was convicted, that's where I'm going to go. And so I went and visited and said, "What can I spend time here? Yes, I think I'm okay spending time here if God wants me to be here, or if God wants me to be in my practice seeing patients." I was ready. So I tell a lot of my colleagues, this is what you need to do. You prepare yourself. If you're going to go to trial, prepare yourself like you're going to a correctional facility. And if you get the grace of God and you're found not guilty, that's wonderful. But prepare yourself. The value of early preparation.
Very good. Yes. Now, one of the things that Chapman prepares people for is oh shoot, now I've lost my train of thought. I'll come back to it. Okay, I'm sure it'll hit me again.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so with the trial, you
Yes.
had a good lawyer. Do you have any
Yes.
recommendations for people? Well, first off, are we done with the prepreparation stage? Are we ready to move on into the
I
trial?
think one of the things that I wanted also to talk about the preparation is a statement that people prepare for, God forbid, if they're sentenced. People prepare a statement, people prepare a personal narrative, which is usually a statement of about maybe 9-10 pages that they present to the judge for sentencing, which kind of tells the judge their life story. I hired a mitigation specialist when I knew that I was in trouble. I knew there's an indictment coming. I hired this mitigation specialist, and his name is Sam Mangle. And this mitigation specialist basically works, he himself is justice impacted. He himself had gone to jail unjustly for insurance problems. He was an insurance agent, and he had gone to jail for 24 months. And basically, he consults to people. He actually consulted, and it's public knowledge. He consulted with two very famous people, Dr. Peter Navarro, who is who was an assistant to former President Trump, and Steve Bannon, who was an assistant to former President Trump. And he helped them with their 4-month incarceration after they got convicted for not testifying in front of Congress against former President Trump. So I hired this person. He helped, he kind of held my hand every step of the way. He went with me to go visit this correctional facility in Otisville. So I would be comfortable kind of figuring out if that's where I'm ready to serve if I'm going to trial. And we prepared this personal narrative. And we worked on it for like a month or so, basically my life story, 10 pages of my life story condensed. And I presented that to my attorney. And my attorney felt that it was very, very helpful because the attorney understood my life story, where I came from, everything that has happened to me, and how did I end up in this situation where I was being indicted and I was facing the criminal justice system. So I believe my colleagues should start preparing that narrative statement if they're facing any legal problems. And I'm happy to help them with kind of just how this narrative is constructed and presenting it early to their attorney, presenting it early even to the prosecutors. So maybe the prosecutors would change their mind. Maybe the prosecutors would see the doctor's life story and change their mind. I have one of the expert coders that worked with us was speaking on his podcast about consulting. He consults with the federal government also, and he consults with the defense on coding issues. And he said that he had a case of a doctor who was very, very busy. During COVID times, he would see lots of patients, and the government came after him for coding and telehealth issues. But that the doctor saw patients during COVID time, and that the doctor actually didn't go back to his home for like 9 months during the peak of COVID, slept in the garage, didn't see his children, didn't see his wife. And he was making the case for the prosecutors, like, do you want to indict this doctor? are you going to be able to face the jury and tell them, listen, this doctor who during COVID times slept in his garage, never saw his wife or children for 9 months to service patients who were experiencing COVID. Do you want to indict him? Are you going to be able to get in front of the jury and present, even if there's concerns about incorrect coding or violations or not doing coding correctly for these complex rules? But there's other things, and so maybe writing your life story and presenting what you did, maybe that would be something that would sway your attorney at least to know that you're innocent, you're not guilty. And then if he can present that to the prosecutors, maybe they'll change their mind. Maybe they'll give you a better deal. Maybe they'll decide not to indict a person. So the value of early preparation, I think, is very, very important.
Very good. And also, when it became more popular, more acceptable, in fact, the government even actually gave us the okay to do telemedicine, and you actually got on board before that even happened.
Yes.
Chapman came out then and actually said, be wary, doctors. The government is going to use this to attack doctors.
Yes.
And of course, you are an example of that. I don't see a lot of it out there, but I mean, it's just a
It's
matter.
coming.
It's coming, exactly.
The prosecutor told the jury, we wanted to make an example of this doctor. She would point her finger at me and said, he stole from the Medicare. He stole from the government. He basically had a scheme to steal from the government, even though the 4 services were $43 each, and we lost on those services.
Right. And the other thing is, and you know, it is, even though you only had 4 charges against you and they were for $43 a piece, the problem is, as the government does, they expand that to cover the entire number of years that they are allowed to go back. So they basically extrapolate and say, well, if you did these 4 services in this amount of time, you're going to extrapolate that over 7 years. How much would that be? That's
$1.5 million.
That's what you actually get charged with. Yes.
$1.5 million.
Exactly.
And the reason, and we found out in trial that the reason why they chose a number above $1 million is because you get additional penalty. You get more points on your sentencing score if it's more than $1 million. So there's, and then we found out that also, according to the number of physicians or healthcare providers that they prosecute every year, which is around 400 to 500 physicians, that is actually the budget of the Office of Inspector General for Department of Health and Human Services. $450 million. They prosecute 450
all salaries.
All salaries.
What we need to do is just have people understand we don't need all those people, and therefore, you know, move them to other jobs. And because I think in the government you basically can't fire anybody, although we need to probably change that law too.
Yes.
And you know, it'll save us a whole lot of tax dollars.
Sure, absolutely.
And of course the other thing about the government is that they don't charge you for what you actually got paid. They charge you for what you bill. And most doctors bill 5 times more. The bill is usually running about 5 times more than what Medicare pays, because Medicare is at the bottom of the list of how much so you usually bill for what the top insurance company pays for, and then Medicare pays like a quarter of that or fifth of that. And but what they do is they get back 5 times what they actually paid you.
Absolutely.
So it's all a money
loss
game.
versus intended loss versus actual loss, and they go for the intended loss. They get more money from you than they paid you.
Exactly. 5 times as much. Yes. Okay. All right. So so as far as preparation then before trial, is there anything else you want to add?
I think basically, and lots of prayers.
No, of course. Yes. It's all of this is in God's hands. We know that.
Absolutely.
Even these attacks on doctors is in God's hands. I mean, they could be stopped just, on a dime if that was his intention. But we as a people are not connected to God. We're connected to, we have other values now. We have money as
Sure.
a value. We have property
Absolutely.
as a value. I mean,
Absolutely.
we can just go back into history and look and see how God has treated civilizations like us.
Yes. Yes.
And it's coming.
Yes.
We
Yes.
we can see
Absolutely.
that coming, kind of like what you're talking about with the Medicare evaluations. We know the trial is coming, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we're going to be in trial with God here fairly shortly. But anyway, let's get back to the medical aspects here.
So once an indictment happens,
Uh-huh.
I think it's very, very important for the physician who gets indicted to have a good grasp of what is the evidence that's against them.
Mhm.
I can tell you, I've talked to a lot of physicians who were attacked, who were victimized, who didn't have access to the evidence that was against them.
Oh,
That they
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 didn't see their discovery?
well, I mean, they saw their discovery, but they saw it briefly with their lawyer
Oh,
and without a lot of access. I had a full access to my entire discovery. We used the service called Cornerstone Discovery, and they actually helped us also in trial. But I had full access to my the voluminous evidence of the evidence that the government collected. And it was quite interesting because I believe that the government doesn't have time. They just collect things and they don't look at them.
mhm.
They didn't look at my evidence. They didn't look at what I had. There were clear emails where I said, I want to be in compliance with Medicare. We need to do this in compliance with Medicare. And we showed that in trial. And this was very convincing to the jury because a month before they said I committed fraud, I wrote an email to all my staff. This is what's going on. These are the rules. We need to be in full compliance with Medicare. And this was surprising to the government because they never looked at this email. They collected it, but they never looked at it. And it wasn't because I knew that I wrote that email and I searched for it and found it in the evidence that the government collected that I was able to present that as evidence in trial. I told you, I spent probably close to 5,000 hours personally on my defense, researching the evidence, looking at every note, every piece of evidence that they had, because I was quite sure that the government didn't look at them. And
Mhm.
so bringing that to my attorney, who was quite responsive, and we presented that evidence in trial, and this service, Cornerstone Discovery, helped us present these exhibits to the jury. That was very, very helpful for my case. So every physician who is attacked and indicted and is justice impacted should review the entire evidence that the government has against them. And if they
Yes.
don't, basically their lawyer should go for Brady violation and Jenks violations if the government refuses to grant them access to this evidence.
Right, right. And one of the things I've been thinking about as far as the involvement of staff and patients, the government pretty much comes in and declares all of your employees and all of your patients as their witnesses. And what
Sure,
I
sure.
was thinking was if a doctor could in their office have every one of their employees sign a paper of I will be in the case of any type of legal issues.
Hmm.
I am a witness for, the doctor, as opposed
Sure.
to just not having anything. And then also get each patient to sign that. That way, if the patients or the employee gets tapped by the government to talk to them, the defense attorney has to be present at that. Am I right with that information, or would that be incorrect?
The defense attorney cannot be present because then he'll be considered as a witness.
Okay.
In my case, I contracted with the Chapman Consulting Group, and
Uh-huh.
their investigators talked to the patients that the government was had interviewed. Investigators can talk to government witnesses.
Okay.
I know Chapman had actually a case where he was appealing because the government said that if the defense talks to government witnesses, that it was obstruction of justice. And they charged one physician with obstruction of justice because not him, his investigators talked to government witnesses, and they thought that that was obstruction because these patients were government witnesses.
Okay.
Having investigators talk to witnesses is very helpful and very important. Never talk to witnesses yourself because
Right.
the government will be very easily will charge you with obstruction or with tampering with evidence. Basically, you're on the sideline, but you can definitely help your attorney by showing them where the exculpatory evidence is, where things that can help them, showing that you're a good physician who followed all the rules and regulations, that you did your training, you did your CME, you did all the work, your documentation is impeccable, your documentation is pristine. And you know, I know the DEA, and I know in my case, I know in other physicians' case, the first thing that they say is everything is falsified. All the records are falsified. Everything is fabricated. This is their first sentence before even looking at anything. They just said, "Oh, you just falsified everything. You fabricated everything." In my case, the prosecutor, even in the healthcare fraud, she made the statements, well, Dr. Rifai co-signed this note and added this needed documentation to make the note billable. So if somebody later on comes and checks, his signature is there and his notation is there. Isn't that what medical records are for? That you document what was done in real time? She made it sound like, oh, he did it, that if somebody reviews this later on, they know that they did the work, even though they didn't do the work. So everything that you do, every note that you write, every documentation that you do in government prosecutors' eyes and the way they present it is fabrication, falsified records. You're fudging the notes. Even though you have electronic medical records that you sign it in real time, they say, "Oh no, you falsified it." One of the government witnesses, we confronted her with an email where she said she did the service that the government said that she didn't do. Even the government's witness said, "Oh no, this is a falsified email." And we said, "How would it be so falsified? It was the government that subpoenaed it, and they got it from Microsoft. We never had hands on it, and you're saying it's falsified?"
Yeah. Yeah, that's cute. Okay. All right. So the other thing was that let's see, oh yeah, as far as recommending trial versus recommending plea agreements, I think we can
Yes.
about finish with this. Do you think this would be kind of
Uh,
the last thing? Give us some information that you've learned about why doctors should go to trial, even in a fraud case, which a lot of us, and I must say I was one of them who said the
sure,
government's going to win fraud cases because
sure,
it's
sure.
really hard to defend yourself against fraud. But you have found out otherwise. Can you give us
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Sure,
shed
sure.
some light on
So,
that for
so,
us?
so, so, one has to know that the rules and regulations, the Medicare rules and regulations are very complex.
Mhm.
And unless the doctor knows that they have done an appropriate service that's appropriately documented, they know they didn't bill on a patient who wasn't there. They know they didn't bill on things that were not done at all. But there's a discrepancy between the coding level and what is being paid. I think the doctor should go to trial. Definitely should go to trial. We know the Bothra case where the government claimed that the entire services that were done were miscoded or coded inappropriately. And then Attorney Chapman showed that yes, they were billed and coded appropriately, and they were able to win this case where the government wanted $450 million. In my case, it's the same thing. It's the complex rules and regulations. The government thought that they had a slam dunk. They had told my attorney, we have overwhelming evidence against Dr. Rifai. Why isn't he pleading? But my attorney knew. My attorney had already talked to the expert coder. My attorney had already talked to a consultant psychiatrist who told him that this is straightforward case. What is the government? Why is the government prosecuting this? Because what Dr. Rifai did was appropriate. What he did was legitimate. And so my attorney really wanted to bring this in front of the jury, and the jury saw it for what it is. We did appropriate services, and the coding was accurate. So the government likes to portray this statistic that their conviction rate is 98%. It's actually not conviction rate. It's actually plea deals. Basically, individuals who decide that they cannot face the government, that they cannot deal with a case with the government, and they submit a plea deal. So if you decide that you want to submit a plea deal, that's fine. You know, if you circumstances, you don't have the finances to go through trial, you feel that you don't have the stamina to go through the stress of trial. I mean, the trial is very, very stressful thing. Or you feel that you want to get over with it and basically serve your time and move on with your life. That's something different. But if you want to fight this, if you feel that you are in the right and you're innocent, you should go to trial. And the statistics are, of those 2% that go to trial, 1% are found not guilty and 1% are found guilty. But in cases, the statistics in cases of healthcare fraud is actually 60-40, 60 for the defendant and 40 for the government. So we have the upper hand. If we do the analysis based on who decides to go to trial, you have a 6 out of 10 chance to prevail in trial versus the government. So depending on your lawyer, if you choose a good lawyer that has good healthcare experience, not necessarily always to have a good lawyer with good healthcare experience. Sometimes you could have a criminal defense attorney with some fraud experience and some healthcare experience, but not very experienced, which was my lawyer. My lawyer, his father was a psychiatrist. His brother was a psychiatrist, so he knew a little bit about the field of psychiatry, but he did get assistance from the Chapman Consulting Group that gave him 2 experts that basically prepared him for trial. So when we had the witnesses on the stand, he was prepared with these experts kind of giving him the responses and the questions to ask these experts. And this was what led to the not guilty verdict. And you know, people now, they say not guilty, but in this day and age, in my mind, and I think in my attorney's mind, and maybe in the jury's, not guilty is innocent. Not guilty is no longer not guilty. Oh, the government couldn't meet the burden of the evidence. In this day and age, if the government cannot convict you, you're definitely innocent. It's not just not guilty. You're completely innocent, and you should go on with your life feeling like you're innocent. But you know, the stench and the humiliation from an indictment, a federal indictment, it will be with one for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the time that you spent with us. Do you have any concluding remarks that you'd like to say to the listeners?
Sure. I'm willing to assist and help people who are going through these wretched experiences, who are being attacked by government, who are being justice impacted. I tell physicians, I think that we're in a good situation right now. Chevron doctrine was repealed. We have a case of jarcossy that is impacting the administrative courts with the DEA. And then we have the case of USA v. Trump, where they're affecting the administrative courts. So this is a good time for physicians, that there is less tools that the government has against the physicians. And so I think go into trial, or even if you get a plea agreement, you should go for the least amount of sentencing time. You should prepare with a narrative. You should hire a mitigation consultant. and you should be prepared to face the government. You should not retreat or go back or surrender. You should try your best for a plea agreement, or if you go to trial, try your best for a not guilty verdict.
Mhm. Very good. And also, if a doctor does agree to a plea agreement, it, like you said, the sentencing needs to be in the plea agreement so that it's not just left up to the judge. Because a lot of doctors get told, oh, you'll only get, a year and a day or something like that. And then the judge slaps a 20-year sentence on you and you go, whoa, wait a minute. That's not what I thought this plea agreement would be. So
Sure,
that plea agreement needs to be actually in the writing, in the agreement itself, as to
sure,
what time you agree to serve,
sure,
and
absolutely,
not
absolutely.
leave it up to the judge's discretion. So,
Absolutely, absolutely,
okay.
absolutely. And but the judges always will have their own discretion, and this is why I talked about the narrative statement that would be included in the pre-sentencing report that gets submitted by the probation officer to the judge. If you convey to the judge a narrative about your case and about your with the allocution and about the physician being contrite about what has happened, I think that will be a long way to kind of swaying the judge to give you the least amount of sentence with the plea agreement.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Rifai. I
My
appreciate you
pleasure.
coming. I
My
so
pleasure.
appreciate you're willing to help doctors. Most everybody that gets into this and that still has a practice like you do, they just go back to their own life, and then, the rest of the world can just pass them by. And it's just very commendable of you to step forward and say, this
We
happened to
have
me and I want to help others.
we have to talk about it. I mean, and I'm asked, aren't you embarrassed about what happened? No, no, this is an unfortunate thing that happened to me. It's unfair. It wasn't right. I'm innocent and I didn't do anything wrong. I helped my patients and I want to help my colleague physicians. And that's why I'm doing all these writings and all these interviews to just give hope to physicians who are facing these situations.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
My
All right.
pleasure. Take care.
Bye-bye.